Hi, Skano. My name is Lesley Garlow, and I'm really grateful to be here with all of you today on unceded territory. So there's a lot of really inspiring things shared already, and I had this whole thing planned that I was gonna tell you guys some facts and stuff, and I was gonna pretend like I had some ideas and some big plans. And then I started thinking about my role here as a displaced Indigenous person, as a mother. And then I started thinking that maybe a little bit about my personal story might be helpful. Maybe it won't be, I apologize in advance. So I am Haudenosaunee from Six Nations Brantford Reserve. Thank you for introducing me. One thing that is interesting about my lived experience here in the Columbia Basin is that my family came from Ontario just before the Oka crisis happened in 1990. My dad decided that living in the urban setting of St. Catharines, Ontario was not the best place to transmit cultural heritage and traditional knowledge. And in some ways, he thought that we could move across the country to the great forests of British Columbia and be able to explore a more meaningful connection to the land, have it be more accessible. It's also those wonderful stories about the Wild West and trains and some of those other incredible elements that we have here, which are the marks of colonialism, but that are also part of our shared history and narrative here in the territory. So we grew up in the small town. We landed in this small place called Malaqua. I believe it's the Chilcotin word for mosquito. So needless to say, it was abundant in water, and it was abundant in cedar trees, and it is still abundant in water and still abundant in cedar trees and that deep growth. I remember when we came across we were driving through the Crow's Nest Pass, and I was just a little girl, and we see these mountains all of a sudden rising above us, and I was just like, where are we? Because I remember also being in Ontario as a little girl on the tallest hill and looking out over the field of maples in the fall, and they were all changing their colors. I remember being a little girl and standing on the side of the Niagara Falls. I remember the sound of the water, the feeling of the water. And I remember all the people around me who maybe didn't know the long history of the water there. And so my dad, as he was raising me here in the Columbia Basin, always reminded me that this is not our water, this is not our territory, and that even though he can only teach us what he knows, that we can never ever know the land without knowing the traditional stories of the land that come from the people who call this place home for millennia. So my understanding that the Sinai's called those the Chaptik, which are the stories and the lessons of how to live together with the land here in an intrinsically connected way, to the animals, to the plants, to the waterways, and to each other, and to all our relations. So I always grew up knowing that I didn't know anything, essentially. And so I grew up here, and I loved the land. I grew up hunting and fishing and trapping with my dad. And he was giving me these Haudenosaunee teachings. One of his teachings that he shared with me was kind of a reiteration of a story. I remember my fluent Cayuga speaking grandmother in St. Catharines sharing with me. And it was a story about how human beings are the only ones who come into this earth needing things from everything else to survive. We don't have enough fur. Maybe some of us do. Maybe I'm starting to get some. But we don't have enough fur. We don't have sharp enough claws. We don't have sharp enough teeth, really. Kind of sharp enough teeth. But we're always needing something from the world around us, from every single element around us. And then I said, well, we have to have something to offer, right? And to me, he said, that's a really great idea. And he said, you know, what we have as human beings to offer is our ability to, to dream and create a physical world out of our dreams. And so I think with that, today I will leave that concept with you and how you take it. We can do incredible things as human beings when we all work together, when we all work to understand all the systems that work together, that important ground bed underneath those cedar trees is sacred, that all the entities that live within that mycelial network is sacred, and that those cedar trees are there because it's part of the creation stories of these territories. When I was a little girl living in Mauiqua, I didn't realize that I was living in this, well, I knew I was living in an incredibly magical and beautiful ecosystem, but I didn't understand that it was part of this huge belt that stretched from, I believe, Idaho, all the way up to Prince George, over 40 million acres, according to the WildSite website. But I also didn't know at that time either that there was this incredible academic named Robin Kilmer, and she made this book called Braiding Sweetgrass. And in it, she states that in some Indigenous languages, the word for plants translates into those who take care of us. I think we're starting to understand that now on a broader scale. I hope we are, anyways. I hope we are for my children, for your children, for all our relations. I think that when we're talking about, so I'm here on behalf of the West Kootenay Watershed Collaborative, but speaking from my own experiences. And when we're talking about science, and we're going to bring in all this Western science and stuff, I think it's really fundamental that when we're having these conversations and making decisions about how we're going to solve these problems, that we are bringing along the regional Indigenous people in a meaningful way that actually values Indigenous knowledge systems and perspectives, including stories and narratives, alongside, and if not in some instances, elevated above Western science and today's modern day sciences as well. I think we're part of a group that is hoping to create a united front of watershed protectors. We're hoping to integrate new understandings and research ethics, such as OCAP, ownership, control, access, and possession of Indigenous knowledges. And so anything that affects their livelihood or that would benefit the communities, all that information directly goes offered free of cost and free of anything, and is just rightfully given to the regional nations because it will value their communities. And that they have the right to know what's happening in their territories as well. So there's a little bit of kind of what we're doing on the Watershed Collaborative. We're just about to do our official launch, and I hope some of you will come to that. Just wanted to leave you with that story about how we as human beings have a responsibility to build great things that take care of all of our relationships with our dreams, and that we can work together, and that everything that we see around us is a manifestation of the metaphysical. So thank you so much, everybody.